Hello, question. John Mead, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Julie.
I'm sorry we got a delay. We're gonna get started now. Good morning, everyone. This is Julie McDonald with My Technologies, and I'd like to thank all of you for attending today's webinar with Cambium Networks. Today's host is John Mead, and he is their Vice President of Engineering and Product Development, and he'll be presenting today. If anyone has any questions, please submit them in the question box, and John will answer them at the end of today's presentation. John, thank you so much for being with us today. We greatly appreciate it. Please go ahead and take it on over.
Great, thank you very much, Julie. Hello, everyone. Thank you for your time. I have about 30 minutes of information for you guys. Please chime in at the end with any questions that you may have. So I'm going to talk to you today about Cambium Networks' cnMatrix portfolio of Ethernet switching. I'm going to give you an overview of our portfolio. Most of you have probably heard it before, so I'll go quickly. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time on what's new, what have we recently released, and also kind of a sneak peek on what's coming. Let's see if I can change slides here. Great. So anyway, so I'm going to talk about our two families of switches, the EX and the TX family of switches. We do have a very cool differentiating capability or feature that's policy-based automation. So I'll give you a quick glimpse of that as well. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about what's new and what's coming. Jumping right into it here, I'm going to talk to you today about our Ethernet switching portfolio, but really what's even more important is the solution that we have at Cambium Networks. Yes, we have the switches, and I'm going to talk to you about that today, but we also have our Wi-Fi portfolio of products, and for the wireless connectivity, our cnMatrix switches for the wired connectivity. We also have something new. It's our NSE 3000, which is our security gateway. We just started shipping this several months ago. And then what really pulls all this together and brings it all together is our cnMaestro management platform. So yes, the switches are great, the Wi-Fi portfolio is great, but all together it provides a very comprehensive and complete solution. So, I work at Cambium, of course I'm going to say this, but this solution for the edge of the customer's network is absolutely very, very competitive with any company you can think of. So anyway, so I wanted to throw that in there before I started with the switches. Now, more specific to the switches, we have something called policy-based automation. I'll talk more about that. It gives you zero-touch simplicity, which is very key for deploying and managing your networks. Security is very important. So we bring what we like to call automated security, auto-detecting devices as they are connected to the switch, auto-segmenting them into the correct network or VLAN. And all the features that I'm going to talk to you about today, they come with the base cost of the switch. So from a total cost of ownership point of view, it really is a competitive offering for the market. So here's kind of an overview of our switching portfolio. We have two families of switches that I mentioned. In the middle of the screen here, you see our EX family of switches, 4 of our switches there, and this is for our enterprise indoor access switch. On the right side, we have our TX family of switches, which is more for our WISP tower deployments. Now, the reason why we have two families of switches is if we tried to do everything in one switch, we would have had to make too many compromises on the cost and on capabilities. So anyway, two families of switches purpose-built for the target deployments. Now, on the enterprise side of the world, these EX switches, I'll give you a little more information. We have 2 series of switches that are shipping today. We have our EX2K series of switches and our EX1K series of switches. I'll tell you a little bit more about the differences between those in a bit, but altogether we have 12 different switches. We have all the switches that you would expect, 8-port switches, 24-port switches, 48-port switches. We have models that support PoE, of course, so PoE plus up to 30 watts per port. but we also have models that are non-PoE as well. In our portfolio, we also have a switch that supports 2.5 gig as opposed to your typical 1 gig Ethernet ports. And on those 2.5 gig ports, we do support universal PoE or PoE++, or following the standard, it's known as 802.3bt. And that allows you to support more than 30 watts. And in this case, we do support up to 60 watts per port. All these switches have fiber uplinks. Almost every switch that we have has 10 gig fiber uplinks. On our 8-port switches, we do have 1 gig fiber uplinks. So that's our EX portfolio of switches. We have 12 of them. Now on the right side of the screen, we have our TX family of switches, and we have a total of 5. Again, we have the TX2K series and the TX1K series. We have 8-port models, 16-port models, 24-port models. All of the switches support PoE, and one of the unique things about these TX switches is we support all the unique PoE modes that are necessary in this industry. So of course we support standards-based PoE, and that's not true for all of the switches developed for this market. I think it's very important to support standards-based PoE, but we also support the passive-based PoE, both low voltage or 24-volt passive PoE, as well as your 48-volt or 54-volt passive PoE as well. These TX switches also support Cambium sync, so they provide that Cambium sync signal out to all the radios to synchronize all the radios together. This enables the radios to be very effective and very efficient with the use of the limited frequency or the limited spectrum. All the radios can get in sync as far as who's receiving and who's transmitting and so on. So these TX switches, very capable switches, exactly like the EX switches, but they have this additional capability of the integrated Cambium sync and these unique passive PoE modes as well. Now on the TX2K series, they do come with removable power supplies, and on the TX 2020, it comes with removable redundant supplies. Now, for all switches in both of the families, we have one code base for both families of switches. It's not 2 different code bases. The code will dynamically detect if it's an EX switch or a TX switch and enable the appropriate features. As we developed these Ethernet switching products, we've been shipping for about 4 years. I joined the company about 5.5 years ago and architected these from the ground up. So one of our initial objectives was to have a very high quality and robust switch, both from a software point of view and a hardware point of view. So we spent a lot of time on that in the beginning, designing that in, coming up with our initial architecture that would support the high quality that we wanted to have. Now these switches are enterprise grade, L2, L3, line rate, non-blocking switches. From an operational efficiency point of view, we put a lot of time and energy into that. This is something we'll never be finished with. We're constantly trying to make these switches easier to use. So easier to deploy, easier to manage, easier to configure, easier to troubleshoot. Security is a hot topic. It has been for a very long time. We have a long list of security features. Our PBA or policy-based automation capability that we have also adds to this secure environment. From a management point of view, these switches are fully managed. We have a very comprehensive CLI, a very user-friendly web GUI. Every feature that we have is instrumented with an SNMP MIB, but also we have cnMatrix, which is either an on-premise or cloud-based network management system that can manage all of your products from Cambium. So not just the switches, the Wi-Fi devices, the switches, the radios, everything. So this cloud-based management system is a significant offering from Cambium. Best in class total cost of ownership. I mentioned that earlier, and everything that I'm mentioning today comes with the base price of the switch. We do have a version of cnMatrix, our management platform, that comes with a subscription, and you get extra features and extra capabilities. But everything that I'm mentioning today comes with the essential version of cnMatrix, which is which comes with the base price of the switches. Okay, here's an eye chart for you. I'm not going to go through this slide, but if you guys take a look at these slides later, this is a list of all 17 of our switches. So we have 12 EX switches, and then the last 5 switches on this list is our TX switches. So it compares all the major attributes of these switches, speeds and feeds and capabilities. It's a good high-level reference. Now, a little bit more detail about our WISPs or tower switches, our TX portfolio of switches. The picture here, the top 3 switches, those are our TX 2K switches. The bottom 2 switches, those are our TX 1K switches. So what's first? These TX switches are purpose-built for the WISP and tower deployments. We're trying to provide a complete solution, not just connectivity for your radios, but also an enterprise-grade, non-blocking, fully managed L2 and L3 switch. It comes with our cnMatrix management platform that I mentioned to you a minute ago. Zero-touch simplicity with our automated configuration capabilities with PBA. I can't do a presentation without talking about PBA, so we'll hear about that in a few more slides. Security, automated security with device profiling and policy enforcement, again, an aspect of our PBA feature. Intelligent and flexible PoE. So we put a lot of time and energy into our Power over Ethernet. It's used by everyone. For example, our PoE switches, 80% of the switches we sell are PoE. The non-PoE switches that we have on the EX side, that's a very small portion of our overall sales. So we put a lot of time and energy into PoE, especially on these TX switches. So you have capabilities on a per port basis. You can enable the PoE, you can disable the PoE, you can get stats on a per port basis. You can get on a per port basis, what is each device drawing? How much power is it drawing on that port? And again, on these TX switches, we do support some of the non-standard PoE modes that are used in this WISP type of market. So we support the 24-volt low voltage passive PoE, as well as the 54 or 48 volt PoE. Now we also support PoE up to 90 watts on these TX switches. On the EX switches, I mentioned we had a switch that supported up to 60 watts. These TX switches can support up to 90 watts per port simultaneously. So Cambium Sync, I mentioned that earlier. We do have dual redundant GPS synchronization sources. You can either use an antenna or you can use a GPS module that Cambium sells called cnPulse. On the TX 2020, it's the middle of the 3 switches at the bottom there. You can see that we have 2 slots for these removable power supplies. So the switch will operate 100% with just 1 power supply, but you can use the second power supply from a redundant point of view. The temperatures, it's hardened with an extended temperature range, and extra surge suppression is provided on these TX switches as well. So that's an overview of our TX switches, very, very powerful and doing very well for us. Okay, policy-based automation, I keep referring to it, I keep mentioning it, and why is that? Well, in today's market, Ethernet switching is a very mature market. You can get a really good Ethernet switch from a lot of different vendors, not just Cambium. So how do you differentiate yourself with other vendors? Well, we do have this capability called policy-based automation. I call it PBA, and this is unique. I do not know of something from the other vendors that can do something similar. Let me give you an overview of what it is. So first of all, the term zero touch. I hear everyone talking about zero touch, and if you ask 10 people what zero touch means to them, you're going to get 10 different answers. So here's my answer for what zero touch is. Zero touch is automating the configuration that you would normally have to do manually. So as an example, when you first deploy your switch, it's very, very common to want to stage that switch with some basic configuration before you deploy it. So you want to create some static VLANs. So you want to identify what ports are going to be used for your uplink ports, possibly make a port channel out of those ports or link aggregation. Your IP address, you might use DHCP, or you might configure a static IP address, and so on and so forth, many examples. So this initial configuration, how do you automate that? If you could automate that and just plug the switch into the network and have all of this configuration automatically happen, that would be considered zero touch. And how do we do that here at Cambium? Well, we do this with cnMaestro. When you register your switch, you purchase the switch, you get a serial number. When you register that serial number in your cnMaestro account, that's basically all you have to do. You can do that before you even physically get the switches. So you can register the switch, and using cnMaestro, you can pre-configure it. Now, later, when you actually physically receive the switch and plug it into your network, the switch, based on its default configuration, will reach out and establish connectivity with cnMaestro. And this is both for if cnMaestro is running in the cloud or on premise. Once it provides connectivity to cnMaestro, it goes through a registration and onboarding process. Part of that onboarding process is to get a config file. You can get that config file, and you can put any configuration in there that you want, and that's how you can do this with zero touch. So you just plug it into the network, you plug the power in for the switch, and away you go. Completely zero touch. So this is what a lot of people consider zero touch to be, but this is only half the story. I think the more interesting half of the story is what to do with the configuration that is required on an ongoing basis. On a day-to-day basis, as you're plugging in new devices to your switch, as you're moving devices from one port to another port, or from one port on one switch to another port on another switch. Every time you connect a device to your switch, you do have to configure the switch, and more specifically, you have to configure that port of the switch. So some examples here I've listed, you're connecting some access points, or you're connecting some security cameras, or printers, or anything, right? If you start talking about IoT devices, now you're talking about thousands of different types of devices. So no matter what you plug into the switch, there is some configuration that you're going to want to do on that switch. The most obvious example is VLAN, right? What VLANs do you want that device to be a member of? There's other configuration that you're going to want to do, QoS related configuration, security related configuration, and so on. So how do we automate this? Well, it's not just about connecting new devices to the switch. It's also what happens when you remove a device. So when you remove a device from a switch, you would like to clean up all that configuration that is associated with that device, so you don't have that port left open on some maybe sensitive VLANs. So anyway, so how do we do this? This is what we use policy-based automation for. It's a very unique capability. If you create a policy for your Wi-Fi access points, if you have 300 Wi-Fi access points in your network, after you create this policy on cnMaestro, it will push that policy down to all the switches in your network. And now for those 300 access points, you just physically plug them in. PBA will automatically detect that device. PBA will automatically configure the switch for that device. And if you unplug that device, PBA will automatically clean up that configuration. So that's PBA at a high level. I have presentations that last hours where I talk only about PBA, but this is kind of a high level summary. Here's a few key points about PBA. So what does it do? It automates the configuration for adds, moves, and changes of network devices as they're connected to your switches. It eliminates the error-prone manual configuration. So manual configuration is error-prone. I fat finger things all the time, and it's also time-consuming. So this goes a long way to simplifying and reducing troubleshooting. Every port is treated equally, right? Once upon a time, people would hard code their ports. So like ports 1 through 4 were hard coded for Wi-Fi access points, and ports 5 through 8 would be hard coded for video surveillance cameras, and so on and so forth. With PBA, every port is treated equally. We don't do anything until we detect the device. So you plug that, in my previous example, if you plug that access point into any port, PBA will detect it and configure that port uniquely because of it's an access point. Security, this is a big one here. So when you plug a device into a port, that device is automatically put onto the correct VLAN or correct subnet as stated by that policy. There's no chance of accidentally putting that device on the wrong VLAN, which could possibly give it access to some sensitive information, sensitive access. Overall, what does PBA do for you? It reduces expenses required to deploy and manage your network. I'm not saying that you don't need an IT staff for your network, but this is one less thing that they have to deal with. Okay, so what's new? We just released software version 4.5 is at the end of December. A lot of content in that release, a lot of new software enhancements, a lot of robustness improvements, ease of use improvements. But I want to highlight a couple PBA enhancements. So I just finished talking about PBA, and here's two enhancements that we did that are very significant. These were driven by customers for the most part. A lot of customers are already using the beta version of this. So one of them is called MAC lists. So I talked to you about, you can create a policy for a certain device type, like an access point or a printer or a video surveillance camera. Well, this enhancement allows you to identify a device based on MAC address. Now, we already supported identification with MAC addresses. You can match an exact MAC address. You can exact a range of MAC addresses. You can match an OUI or vendor MAC addresses. But this feature allows you to create a list of non-contiguous MAC addresses, up to 200 MAC addresses. So you can put 200 MAC addresses into this list, and if a device is connected to your network that matches any one of those 200, then this particular policy that uses that MAC list as a rule or as an identifier, all of those devices the policy will be applied to those devices and the configuration for the ports that those devices are connected to. And we support up to 10 of these lists. So this is a very flexible feature. Customers are excited. The customers I've talked to are very excited to give this a try. The second enhancement that we made is based on the physical location of the switch, of the switch. So it allows the actions to be applied to a device based on the switch location. So let's say you create a policy for all of your video surveillance cameras. You can have the actions for that policy be slightly different based on the location of that device. So like for access points, let's say you have a campus and you have 3 or 4 buildings on your campus, and one of the buildings is public. Let's say it's the cafeteria. You may want slightly different QoS rules or whatever for that device. So you have one policy for all your video surveillance cameras. You have one mechanism to identify those video surveillance cameras, but you can have different sets of actions based on the physical location of that switch. So for the devices in your cafeteria, you can have different rules than devices in your employee-based buildings. So anyway, so that's the second feature, second enhancement for PBA, a very cool feature. And let me change topics a little bit and talk a little bit about what's coming next. So we provide these switches, and I've been talking about these EX switches, and I said we have 12 different models. We have some EX 1K switches that are available and shipping today. We have EX 2K switches that are available and switching today. What's coming next is a higher end of switches, again targeted at the edge or access layer of your network, and these are going to be the EX3K switches. So why do we have 3 different series of switches to address this enterprise edge? Well, it's a huge market. The total addressable market is, this slide needs to be updated. On this slide, I'm saying 9.6 billion. It's closer to 10 or 11 billion now, depending on where you get your data. But that market, I'm talking about only edge switches. I'm not talking about the huge data center market. I'm not talking about the huge number of core switches that are sold. For the edge switches only, it's a $9.6 billion market. So the way we go after that space, that market segment, it's the same as a lot of the other switching vendors. We have different series. So we have the EX1K, the 2K, and we're coming out with the 3K. So the EX2K, that is the sweet spot of this enterprise access layer. A very long list, a comprehensive feature list, and very aggressively priced, very competitively priced. Now, some customers that you talk to, they'll say, oh, I don't care about all those features. I don't care. I just need a low price. But I still want a high quality switch. I still want a fully managed switch. And so what do we do in that case? Well, that's why we have the EX1K. So the EX1K is price driven. Features are secondary. And the prices on our EX1K switch, they're about the list prices, about half the list price of the EX2K. So that's what we have today. We have the 2K portfolio of switches, and we have the EX1K as well. What's coming next this year, 2023, is our EX3K switches. Now, what do? Well, they cost more, but you also get more for that money. You get quite a bit more. So I've listed the main capabilities that come with the EX3K. So number one, dual removable power supplies. All the switches that I've talked about before on the EX side, not on the TX. The TX already have removable power supplies. On the EX3K, we are also going to have dual removable power supplies for redundancy purposes. Some customers, they will not buy a switch unless it has removable redundant power supplies. So it opens up a new class of customer with this EX3K. So what else? I talked about these, about PoE and about 802.3 BT that supports more than 30 watts. So when you talk about video surveillance cameras, the high-end ones that have mechanical movement, some of them have heaters and coolers built in. Some of those video surveillance cameras can draw more than 30 watts. Another example is some of the more advanced Wi-Fi access points. Some of those need more than 30 watts. So the new standard 802.3 BT does allow for up to 60 watts, depending on need 60 watts, but they definitely need more than 30 watts. So anyway, these EX3K switches will have high density availability of these ports. The majority, 99% of all switches you buy today, all PoE switches that you buy today, will support 802.3 AT, which supports 30 watts. So this 60 watts is key for some of the more advanced devices coming out. Another element of these EX3K switches is we will introduce higher density of multi-gig ports. Now, I meant in our EX2K line, we do have one switch already that has multi-gig ports. It's a low number of ports. It's more of a hybrid offering. We have 6 2.5 gig ports and 8 1 gig ports. On these 3K switches, much higher density of multi-gig ports. In fact, our 24-port switch, all 24 ports will be 2.5 gig capable. Another item on these EX3K switches is more advanced features. So we're using a different architecture on these switches, uses different silicon, higher end silicon that supports not only more advanced features, but you can scale up more. For example, the number of routes on our existing switches, we support up to 512 routes today. On this EX3K, we're going to be able to support much more than that. Now, I'll mention one more switch. It's not really an edge switch, so maybe it doesn't belong on this slide. But anyway, it's an all-fiber model, which can be used as a fiber aggregation switch or fiber distribution switch. this is probably one of our most important programs, and we're working very hard on this one. So it will be our first fiber distribution switch. Up till now, we've only had edge switches. So that's kind of a sneak peek into what's coming in the next 12 months. It's this new EX3K portfolio. So that is all I had for today. Please, Julie, I'll hand it back over to you. Please let me know if there's any questions.
Thank you very much, John. And yes, wonderful presentation. And I do have some questions here for you. Let's get started with the first one. Question is the cnMatrix management free?
cnMaestro comes in 2 flavors. I'm sorry, Julie, that's what you said, cnMaestro, right?
Yeah, okay, I said cnMatrix, but whatever you can tell us about the system, yeah. And
yeah, so okay, thanks. Yeah, thank you. So cnMatrix, the switches can be managed via multiple interfaces. So we have COI. It's a very comprehensive COI. It uses a Cisco-like syntax. And so if you know how to configure a Cisco box, you can configure one of our switches with the COI. COI is free, comes with the switch. The second management capability is a web GUI. It's a very user-friendly web GUI. This is another example of a device manager, right? You're managing one device at a time, and it's a typical web GUI that you've probably seen on other products. I like it quite a bit. We just made a lot of enhancements to it, and that also comes with a switch. It's free. Every feature on our switch is instrumented with an SNMP MIB, and so you can use any SNMP application that you may have that you used in the past, and again, that is free as well. Now, the big question is, what about cnMaestro? cnMaestro is that can be run either on-premise or in the cloud, and it's a network system manager, so it manages multiple devices. It can manage all your switches, it can manage all your Wi-Fi APs, it can manage any Cambium product you name, it can manage it. cnMaestro has 2 flavors. One is called cnMaestro Essentials. cnMaestro Essentials is free, and it's very comprehensive. Everything I mentioned today, almost everything I mentioned today is you get that capability with cnMaestro Essentials. cnMaestro is free. Now, we also have something called cnMaestro X. cnMaestro X will give you more statistics and will enable additional features. For example, we have a feature, a Q&Q feature. I haven't mentioned it before. That feature requires cnMaestro X. So another example, with cnMaestro, of course, you can view and monitor stats on your equipment. I don't have the exact numbers accurate here, but with cnMaestro Essentials, I think you can get like 7 days stats, historical stats up to 7 days. With cnMaestro X, I think that grows up to 30 days. Don't quote me on that, but anyway, it's much longer. So that's an example of what you get with cnMaestro X. And cnMaestro X does take a subscription.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you for clarifying the different levels or flavors, like you said, because we always like to hear about that. Fantastic. Thank you. Next question. Does Cambium offer surveillance lines? Do you have any surveillance equipment?
So we do not sell the cameras themselves, but supporting video surveillance cameras is very important to us. So we do have a lot of video surveillance cameras in our labs when we test with them. And I use that example when I talk about PBA. We also have a lot of video surveillance deployments. I was just talking about this last night, but we have customers with hundreds of cameras connected into their Cambium network and running multicast technology, IGMP, and it works. It supports it very, very well. It's a very hardened solution for us. We have lots of customers that have deployed it, but we don't sell the actual cameras.
Understood. Thank you so much, John, for that clarification. Next question here. Are all of your access points rated IP67? You may have mentioned this, but we're just asking again.
Yeah, so the switches themselves are not IP67. They need to go inside of some type of enclosure. However, they are hardened from a temperature point of view, and they are hardened from a surge protection point of view. Now, for the Wi-Fi radios themselves, we do sell both indoor and outdoor Wi-Fi access points. So some are rated high and some are not.
Thank you very much, John. Next question here for you. Regarding the EX2K and the EX1K series, do they have a consumer type of indoor access switch?
I would not call these consumer switches. I would consider these enterprise grade switches. You know, the EX1K, I would consider them SMB or small medium business type of switches. You know, these are fully manageable switches, fully functional, L2 and L3 switching at line rate, non-blocking. So you know, a consumer switch, you can drive down to your local electronics store and buy one. And, you know, these are the ones you put in the corner of your house. And if something goes wrong in your network, you usually just, instead of troubleshooting it, you just power cycle the switch. That's not what we have, right? These are more enterprise grade. They're made to be robust. They are made to last years and years and years, and they will not bring down your network.
Thank you very much, John. And for regarding lasting years and years, can you tell us about the warranties on the devices? And is this a direct replacement for any issue?
Yeah, so good question, and sorry for not mentioning it. We have a really good warranty that comes with the base price of the switch. So we have on our EX switches, we have a 5-year warranty that comes with the switches, and on our TX switches, it comes with a 3-year warranty. As far as same-day replacement, that is an extra support that you can purchase.
Excellent. Thank you, John. Next question here for you. Regarding Cambium Sync, does this work with WISP tower switches, or, you know, how about the EX models?
Yeah, the EX models do not support Cambium Sync. This is supported only on our TX switches and only on the TX2K switches, not on the TX1K switch. So the TX2K, they get a GPS signal either we have a GPS module on the switch, so all you need is an antenna, or you can use Cambium CN Pulse, which does have an internal GPS module, and you can feed that into the switch as well. You can use either one of those sources, or you can use both if you want some redundancy, which is very cool. So anyway, once we have that signal, it's basically a 1 pulse per second signal that's you know, synchronized based on GPS. We inductively couple that Cambium Sync signal onto each of our Ethernet ports, so that when you connect one of our radios to our switch, the radio gets the Cambium Sync signal from our switch. So you don't need a separate GPS device for each of the radios on your tower. They can all get it directly from the switch. The
John,
TX2K
thank you.
switch.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for answering all of our questions today. And thank you to everyone for attending our webinar with Cambium Networks. And if anyone has any further questions, of course, please feel free to contact their sales rep or email us at sales@microcomtech.com. And if anyone wishes to review the products mentioned or shown today, please note that this webinar presentation has been recorded and will be uploaded to our Microcom YouTube channel, so you can review our whole webinar over again. Thank you, John. Have a fantastic day. Appreciate all the information you shared with us. And until next time, my friend, we will continue to have webinars with you as the future comes along.
Looking forward to it. Bye, everyone. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, John. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.